Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So today I thought I'd share a build that I've been running the past month or so. It's a unconventional melee DPS Druid bear build that I came up with myself, and I found it to be really effective and fun. So I ran an iconic version, but I also am including a free-to-play version that starts at level 1 in this video with some tweaks, but the same 3-class split with slightly different levels of those classes. But we're going to get into, in this video, how I played it, some reasons why I did what I did, tips for playing Bear Druid in general, and just my general experiences. So I made the decision recently to actually go back and start going for heroic completionists. I never have, because I've always been more of a player that stays at endgame and just raids a lot or rolls up other alt characters, but I actually made, or just does epic reincarnations. But recently I've been deciding to actually go for heroic completionists. So I've been trying to make builds that are both very effective but also a little different and fun, and this is what I came up with for Druid. I found this build very effective. I mean, any level, I mean, R1 leveling was a breeze. Now that said, I do have like 70 plus Reaper points, which helps, but very effective for me for R1 leveling. And in game, I've been playing it in R6s, R8s, R10s, and I think it's doing just fine. So let's get into the iconic Maul version. So I used a Maul version for this just because you guys know, I mean, I had all these Mauls, decked out Mauls with fully crafted with sentient jewels in them and such. So I went for a Maul variation, but the second variation in this video is going to be for slashing weapons. It starts at level 1, the free-to-play version. So for what I played, I used this split. I used 12 Druid, 6 Dark Apostate, and 2 Fighter, and we'll explain why I did that later on. So here's the starting stats. I'll copy and paste right here on the video. So here's the starting stats and level up for a 36 point. The reason, and we'll get more into this a little bit, but the main reason you go 6 Dark Apostate here is for the level 6 Sylvanas deity feat. So you need 6 levels of Cleric or Dark Apostate to get access to the level 6 Sylvanas deity feat, and that gives you +2 critical range to Mauls. So that's why I did that. Plus it gives you those 5 Dark Apostate gives you access to a couple different abilities from Strength Domain, which are really nice, which we'll get into in a minute. I went PDK on the level split, or in the class, or the on the race, I'm sorry, for the past life and fighter levels, and it's just you know, it's never a bad choice, but mainly my choice was for Maul synergy in this build, because you can only access Sylvanas on a handful of different Forgotten Realms iconics, and PDK for me was my favorite pick for it. The other reason why I did this, and this is totally just a cosmetic for fun thing, but PDK and half work, when you run a bear or a wolf druid, they scale cosmetically, they scale larger, and it's just a lot of fun. So that's a big reason to play a PDK or half work, which the free-to-play version is going to be a half work. But just know that, like, just like how if you've seen different size mounts running around in the public area, the biggest mounts in the game that you can get are those that are being rode by a PDK or a half work, just because they're bigger characters and it scales bigger. So I got a lot of comments as I was playing this PDK bear. They're like, one person I was grouping with was like, "Oh my gosh, that's the biggest bear I've ever seen." And it literally is. I mean, you'll be a gigantic bear. It's just fun. It doesn't make any difference in the stat wise, but just cosmetically, it's just a lot of fun to be a very large bear. And if you're someone who maybe you hate the way half work or purple dragon knight looks, well, you're going to be in bear form most all the time, so it doesn't really matter as much. I mean, unless you're on a mount, it's not going to matter. So for the free-to-play slashing weapons versions, so these are both two-handed fighting characters. By the way, you want to be two-handed fighting on a bear. It has a lot of synergy because they get a big base damage increase, so it's really nice, especially when you get into using the Epic Destinies actives, things like Quick Cutter and Adrenaline. So the free-to-play version, I made a 28-point version for a character starting at level 1. So the split for this one is going to be the same 3 classes, but the split's a little different. So it's going to be 18 Druid, 1 Dark Apostate, 1 Fighter. You don't get a deity or domain in this version. Well, at least you don't get as much, because you're only taking, you don't get any deity because you're only taking 1 Dark Apostate, and you don't get a domain. But you don't need it as much because this version uses slashing weapons. You're not using Mauls, so you don't need the extra Dark Apostate levels to get access to the Sylvanas deity feat at level 6. So that's why it uses less. And I felt like It was better to go more Druid levels here versus getting, say, like the stuff from Strength Domain, because 18 Druid means you get more of the bear cores in the Nature's Protector tree, which is the bear tree. So that gives you more attack speed and such. So a couple other things about the free-to-play version. So it went half orc for more strength damage. You certainly could go other races if you want. This could be adapted to any race of your choosing, but I think half orc is probably the best choice, especially if you have racial action points from, say, like tomes and racial past lives, because you get half orc stuff's really nice for more strength and damage, extra power attack. You can boost your power attack and such in the half orc tree. But certainly if you want to go human, that would be fine. Something like Azamar would be fine too. There's other good choices. So the only other differences between the free-to-play version and the iconic version is a few of the feats are tweaked. Really the only main one is the improved critical. You go improved critical slashing, of course, instead of improved critical bludgeoning, because you're using slashing weapons. So this is going to be a good build. Say if you have like the Sword of Shadow sitting around, this is a great build for that. So one fighter, so getting to the, actually before we get into the one fighter, let me talk more about the one Dark Apostate. You're still going to take one Dark Apostate on the free-to-play version. What Dark Apostate gives you, even if you're not on the Sylvanas version, the one level gives you an imbue toggle that you can access from the Dark Apostate tree, and you get Divine Might access with the one Dark Apostate through the War Priest tree, so that's a really, really good benefit from a one-level splash. Druid does not have access to an imbue toggle, so if you don't take a level of, say, something like Favorite Soul or Cleric, you get you just don't have access to that. But I felt like Dark Apostate was better than base Cleric here, just because you do get access to that imbue toggle. If you were to take, say, instead of one Dark Apostate, one Cleric or one Favorite Soul, you wouldn't get access to a imbue toggle, because War Priest and War Soul don't get access to their toggle until they get to tier 4 in their tree. So I think Dark Apostate is just simply better. The one fighter, okay, now this is where some builds may vary a little bit, but I think one fighter for a free-to-play player who starts at level 1 or free-to-play build is better, just because the one fighter gives you a few things. It gives you an extra feat, and it gives you access to haste boost through Kensei. If you're a free-to-play player, you're not going to have Vistani to access haste boost. Plus, if you get it through Kensei, you can spend less action points to get that haste boost. And, in addition, we said the one fighter gives you Stunning Blow. It also gives you another extra feat, essentially, because with one fighter level, you get all your weapon proficiencies and martial weapons, whereas if you didn't take one fighter, say you took one warlock, for example, for Arcane Warrior, and you would have to take another feat on proficiency for your chosen weapon type. So yeah, that's pretty great. With the extra fighter feats too, I took Stunning Blow there at early stages for this free-to-play build, just because you get more stuns. With Bear, you get a lot of stuns, and getting Stunning Blow early is just really nice and convenient to have as you level up. So in this build, you'll actually have 3 different stuns if you take Stunning Blow. You'll get Great Maul, Roar, and Stunning Blow. So let's get into the stats and why I chose the stats I did. So this is going to be a strength-based build. Strength is your most important stat. It's important for your stun DCs, attack and damage. For the iconic version, since we're going Strength Domain, and we're going to be able to get a couple different perks from Strength Domain with the iconics, since we're taking more Dark Apostate levels, you also get the benefit from Strength Domain of Strength powering your reflex saves instead of Dexterity. So you're going to have awesome reflex saves on the iconic version. Strength is just great on this build. You need to go Strength. You have a lot of synergy with Rage, and it's awesome to be able to get Strength higher. Like with gearing, you can just get Strength higher. There's just more ways to boost Strength than there are, say, like Wisdom-based builds, for example. So it's clearly the choice that you want to make for this build. Other stats, I guess, other comments on these stats: con, HP, of course. Wisdom is not, it is the main casting stat for Druid, but it's not super important here because we're a melee. But it does, you need some to get your minimum caster requirements, and I'll explain that in just a second. Charisma, your trance is going to be Divine Might from Dark Apostate, which needs Charisma. It is powered by Charisma, so you don't want to dump Charisma. You want to get as good of a Charisma score as you can, so you want to put some points there. And that's one of the advantages you could have of, say, going one Favorite Soul instead of one Dark Apostate. You would get from one favorite soul, you would get the option in more soul of either charisma or wisdom based trance. So wisdom would probably be a little better here, a little bit more synergy, but I still went one dark apostate since you would not get access to an imbue toggle if you went one favorite soul. So I felt like dark apostate is clearly the better choice still. Despite that, I just felt I should explain that for those of y'all who are wondering why I went one dark apostate and not one favorite soul. Okay, a couple comments on the wisdom for the free-to-play version. So I started with 11 wisdom for the free-to-play version just for new players. This is so that brand new characters can cast level 1 spells immediately. So for you all who don't know, any spell casting in DDO requires you to have a stat of 10 for the main casting stat plus 1 per level of spell to cast. So in order to cast level 1 spells, you have to have, on a druid, you have to have 11 wisdom. Now you can get this from tomes or from items, but I felt like for a free to play player who's not going to have tomes, go ahead and just start with 11 wisdom so you can start casting your level 1 spells right out of the gate. If you're a more advanced player and you're comfortable, if you have gear ready to go, you have tomes ready to go, and you want to take less wisdom at the character select screen here, sure, you can do that. But for a new player, I went 11 wisdom just for convenience for this. You can also keep in mind that if you do run into issues, which you shouldn't run into issues, but if you just equip a wisdom item while you're leveling this build, you can also drink Owl's wisdom potions, which are sold in the middle of the marketplace for not a lot of platinum. They're pretty cheap. So you can drink those in order to meet your minimum caster requirements. It'll give you a +4 to wisdom. But it's just something, it's just an option at low levels if you are starting out, say on a new server or hardcore or something, and you just don't have access to a good wisdom item, or even any wisdom item at all. But they should be pretty common. Just go to the auction house, you'll find them in chest. If you're a new player, just make sure you have a wisdom item equipped. I remember when I put out like melee cleric builds with low wisdom before. I get a lot of questions about this, but you just got to have something equipped. If you don't have enough wisdom, you will see an error that'll say your score is too low to actually cast your spells, but you just need to get some more wisdom on your character. Okay, another thing to be aware of is that for the non-iconic version, for the free-to-play version, you won't have proficiency for martial weapons until you take the fighter level at level 4, and I'm recommending you take it at level 4 on this build. So you can deal with this by just using a quarterstaff for the first 3 levels or a one-handed weapon that you are proficient in. It's not a big deal. I mean, the first 3 levels will go by really fast. The reason why I didn't take the fighter level until level 4 is because you can't start taking the natural fighting feats from Druid until you get to level 3 Druid. So I needed to take those levels first so that I didn't have to waste feats. It was more efficient with feat wise. See, if I took the fighter level like at level 1 or something, I would have to take the later feats earlier, which just wouldn't be as convenient. I felt it was better to just take I would have to take like something like Quicken early, very, very early, way too early to when you can actually use it, have enough spell points to support it. I mean, so that's why I did that. It's not a big deal. Just use a staff or something. I mean, right out of the gate, you can get quarterstaffs in Korthos as your first weapon choice. So just do that. You'll be fine. Feats. So let's get into, I guess, more explanations for feats. So for the iconic, had an extra feat here because PDK gets an extra feat being a human type race, so I was able to fit in the spring attack line of 3 feats. I didn't put this into the free to play version because went half work, didn't have enough feats for it. But spring attack is really nice. It gets you out of hairy situations, and it's just in general, it's nice to be able to zerg quests faster. So remember also about the iconic, you are starting at level 15, and the feat order here assumes you start at level 15. So this feat order is not recommended if you're starting at level 1. Say if you're on hardcore or something on an iconic starting at level 1. Some feats in here I did shuffle and take them earlier than normal, like Quicken, since it allows delaying other feats with prerequisites you can only get later. So it was just more efficient with the feat selection. Let me fit in everything I wanted to fit in by taking some of these earlier, and it didn't matter since you're starting at level 15 anyway. Because I wouldn't normally take, obviously, if I was starting at level 1, I wouldn't be taking an iconic at like a feat like Quicken at level 3 or something. So anyways, getting on more comments on the feats. I did take 2 of the new feats that came into the game with the Myth Draenor expansion. So I did take Eerie Aim. I think this is a no-brainer for most melee builds now, especially this build, which is a power attack build. You get more to hit. if nothing else, I mean, the +10 to hit makes it clearly worth it for most builds, but you also get some other bypasses and such. Also took Patience at level 30. I mean, this is a high damage, 200 fighting build. So despite the attack speed loss, I think you're definitely going to benefit from Patience more than you'll lose despite that attack speed loss. Just because, again, this build has a high base attack damage. Bear Druid gets an increase to your base attack damage. So really nice. Also, this build smashes a lot of active constantly. So definitely, I would rather have the +1 crit multiplier for in-game. So I don't take Patience until level 30. What else? Another comment, because you all will see, I mean, I know a lot of builds go precision, but you cannot go precision on this build. You have to go power attack because you cannot use precision while raging, and Bear gets all kinds of benefits in the Bear tree from raging. So you want to be raging. You're basically going to be raging all the time on this build. Another thing, I guess getting to alignment now, the alignment I chose is chaotic neutral. You need to be chaotic in order to get the extra benefits from the Harbinger of Chaos feat, which we are taking, and went neutral, so chaotic neutral instead of like chaotic good or something. But neutral just is because there's no synergy with, say, being like chaotic good. You want to choose neutral, just chaotic neutral and not chaotic good, because neutral means you take less alignment based spell damage. So let's get into a domain now for the iconic version. So for the iconic Sylvanas version, you do get strength domain, which is really nice and synergizes super well with this build, because you can use your turn undead as a buff. Obviously, you're not actually turning undead when you cast turn undead, you're just using it for the benefits. So with strength domain, every time you use a turn undead, you get +3 stacking strength that stacks with everything for 20 seconds. So you just use that as a buff. And I already mentioned, but you get also your strength score to reflex saves, which you're going to get. You have such a high strength in this build, you're going to have really high reflex saves. So I also took on this build to capitalize on that even more. I took epic reflexes, so I don't auto fail reflex saves on a roll of 1. Let's get into skills. So skills, I went heal and UMD. That was my preference. Those are the only 2 skills I personally care about. So heal for positive spell power, UMD for arcane scroll use. I mean, heal is not a huge deal because especially when you get to end game, you're going to be using the heal from Fury of the Wild, which doesn't scale using your positive spell power, but still nice to have some positive spell power because you do have some heals you can cast on others, just for throwing heals on others mainly. But if you want to skip heal, fine. Also, heal's good because you're going to be using positive spells until you get up to high enough level to use the Fury of the Wild tree. So Fury of the Wild heals. So yeah, that's why I went heal. Also, UMD I always take on every build. It's just my preference. I want to be able to use teleport scrolls and other arcane buffs. Now, I didn't bother taking Intimidate since this is not a tank build. It's a DPS build. But if you want to be more tanky, you could take Intimidate if you want to. A couple other things to be aware of, I guess, about the scroll usage on this build. So you can't actually use scrolls in animal form, which is a bummer. I wish they would allow you to do that. So anytime you want to use a scroll, you do have to drop form, but that's fine because we're really just using scrolls for teleport or for buffs, and you have to get out of animal form anyways in public areas to use your mount. So it's not that big of a deal. You just want to run to the quest on your mount, get into the quest, buff yourself with any scrolls, and then put on your bear form. Okay, getting down more into enhancements. So here's some screenshots of the enhancement split I went with. This is for the iconic, but the free-to-play version would basically be the same, except you take the 5th core, Nature's Protector, because you have access to it. So feel free to tweak this to your preference, but the main things you're going for, I'll go over now. So you want tier 5 bears, just all kinds of obvious nice things in the bear tree. A couple of the abilities like Lightning Strikes the Mountain in tier 5 I played with, but it didn't seem very good, so I ended up not using it. Tier 5 bear also gives you the ability to wear metal armor and not break your druidic oath, so that's very important if you want to wear heavy armor. Tier 4 wolf you want to clearly take for the attack speed in tier 4, so definitely go tier 4 wolf. And the other things you want to go for, other than tier 4 wolf, tier 5 bear, you want to go tier 1 dark apostate for that imbue toggle. That's the main reason we took tier 1 levels of dark apostate on the free-to-play version and on both versions, really. Tier 1 war priest, which again you get access to from your dark apostate level or levels, depending on which of these spells you're using. But you want to go tier 1 war priest for divine might for your trance. And then tier 1 Kensei for your haste boost. You could, if you wanted to, if you have access to Vistani, do Vistani instead. But getting it through Kensei, again, has the advantage of using less action points. And this is a build that is reaching in a lot of trees, so it's pretty tight on action points. Although that said, a lot of people like Vistani because of using Vistani to haste boost, because there's a lot of really useful things you can get there in the lower parts of that tree. So it's up to you, but I've been going Kensei since we have the fighter levels for haste boost. This character that, as you've seen on the screen here, this character has some racial action point tomes. So if you're free to play, you'll have a few less action points to spend, but generally stick to this concept and you'll be fine. Tier 5 bear, tier 4 wolf for the speed, and the single tier 1 splashes and the different cleric trees and the fighter trees for the essential things I just went over. A couple other things I need to point out: if you're on the free-to-play version, don't take the righteous weapon line in More Priest, because you won't have a favored weapon if you're not if you're going with the slashing weapons version, so it won't do anything for you. Instead, skip that and put those points into the half orc tree. And really, a lot of the universal trees, you see me putting points in because I have universal tomes. If you have access to additional points, stick that in the half orc tree instead on the free-to-play version. Let's get into Epic Destinies now. So Epic Destinies, I went with tier 5 Fury of the Wild, tier 3 Grandmaster Flowers, and tier 3 Dreadnought, as you can see here. And this is the split I'm using for leveling. I mean, once you get to cap, you may want to use the Fury ED toggle instead. It's of the one from the Monk tree, which is what I'm using. It's personal preference. The Monk one is really nice for leveling because it does get a little less helplessness damage, but it gets an extra 15% movement speed, which is why it was my preference. It just makes you faster. Reaper trees, the things you want to use, I know a lot of you all may not have access to Reaper points, but basically it's pretty straightforward. Put your points into Dread Adversary and Grim Barricade. The first thing you want to go for if you have just a few Reaper points is you want to get the tier 1 Reaper strike ability, and Dread Adversary is 30% extra double strike clicky. That's a gigantic, huge DPS increase if you're not anywhere close to double strike cap. But after that, it's really personal preference as to how many points you have and how much you value survivability in Grim Barricade versus tactics, DCs, and DPS from Dread Adversaries that you want. But I want to be clear that Reaper points are not required to play this build. It's just extra bonuses. If you don't have any Reaper points, if you're on a fresh character, it's totally fine. They're not mandatory to play this build at all. Let's get into some active attacks. So this build does use a ton of active attacks. Maul is one of your key attacks, and then later you get the upgraded version, which is Great Maul. Those are just super vital. Great Maul, it stuns, and it also does extra damage. And using Maul gives you charges of Killer Instinct, which are stacks you need to charge. When you get to 2 charges of Killer Instinct, this allows you to use your Roar spell with an AoE stun effect. So you have on the free-to-play version, you're gonna have 2 single target stuns and 1 AoE stun in Roar. So that's really good. Slash is another animal form ability. It's nice, does extra damage, strips armor class. So that's pretty nice, worth hitting. Once you get into epics, Quick Cutter from Fury of the Wild becomes your best AoE damage ability, and you should be using it every single time it goes off cooldown. It is that good. It is so good. One nice thing you can do on this build to clear rooms is charge your Killer Instinct to 2 stacks, use your Roar to stun, and then kill everything with Quick Cutter. It's just a really good attack chain. Bear. Now, one other thing I want to point out, Bear also has access to trip abilities like the Tremor spell. There's even an ability in tier 5 of the Bear tree, which, I didn't play around with those too much, but it seems like they can be pretty useful. I personally only focused on stun and really didn't use trip at all. The reason I did that is because trip does not count for purposes of adding extra helplessness damage. When a mob is tripped, they are not considered helpless, so you don't get that extra damage. That's why I didn't bother, even though there's a lot of mobs that are immune to stun, say like undead, that you can trip. So if you want, you can use it, but personally for me, leveling on R1, I was killing things really quickly anyway, so I didn't really see the point of CCing if it didn't add extra helplessness damage, but certainly it can be really good depending on the content you're running, depending on like the power level of your gear and such. So use that if you would like, but just note that I did kind of pass on using it just because it doesn't cause you to do more damage. It's just CC, but it's good CC if you need it. If you need it, it's there. You'll just have to make sure you slot in trip stuff into your gear set. Bear in terms of other things you want to hit in combat, the hardest thing about this build for me is you have a lot of short-term buffs you want to activate, and you need to have your hotkeys in good order on this build in order to play it to its maximum effectiveness. Things you need to hit regularly in your rotation are some of the obvious ones: Divine Might, and gives you your insight bonus to attack, damage, and tactics DCs. Haste boost, the best action boost in the game. You want to be hitting that, using all your haste boosts all the time. I mean, you want to use them as all the charges you have. You want to go through those in a quest. I mean, it's just a big DPS boost. Reaper double strike boost we already talked about. You're gonna be clicking that. Turn Undead for extra strength. Now, turn Undead just for strength. The turn Undead's a little bit laggy, so this should probably be something you hit as you run into combat before you get into combat to get that extra strength for you, and also everyone around you, by the way, in your party. You get an extra +3 strength because you'll be it's half your cleric level, or half your cleric or dark apostate level, and we're gonna be 6 dark apostate on the iconic. So if you are on the iconic, use turn undead for that. If you're on the free-to-play version, you don't need to hit turn undead. You're not gonna have benefits because you won't have a domain. Another like bear form specific abilities that are super good, you're gonna be clicking a lot that are short-term buffs. Rising Fury is amazing for extra strength and con. Animal Growth is amazing for extra strength and constitution as well. Flight from the Wolf Tree, super good. It's extra dodge, punch extra dodge that ignores dodge cap. So particularly in tough fights, you want to be using that. You got Primal Scream from the Fury of the Wild Tree for more strength and constitution as well. And most importantly, Druid Rage, so Rage of the Beast. So Bear gets huge bonuses for raging. So you, as I mentioned earlier in this video, you always want to be raging. Now, you do get fatigued, and unlike, say, Barbarian, you don't get immunity to that fatigue while raging. So you need to make sure you have a Lesser Restore potions, or you just use your Lesser Restore spell. You do get a Lesser Restore from both Druid and Clerics. So yeah, it's fine. You just got to make sure you hit Lesser Restore after your rage wears off. So yeah, just be aware of that. But yeah, you always are going to be raging 100% of the time on this build. Another thing I used as an active, I used the legendary Severed Tentacle from Vecna, which gives you an extra +6 psionic bonus to strength. So, and I alluded to this before, but this build can just get huge amounts of strength. I didn't spend the time to optimize my gear set for this build specifically. I just took my old melee cleric gear set and I swapped out 2 items. But even just by doing that, and I could have gotten this higher if I would have really optimized this build, but I was still getting over, when fully buffed, I was getting over 120 strength on this build. So yeah, you can get just gigantic amounts of strength, which is super good because that adds your strength and damage, obviously adds to your attack and damage, obviously adds to your tactics DCs, and in the iconic version, it adds to your saves. So it's just super, super good. Other comments I just finishing up here, just other comments. I know there's a lot of good splits and builds for Bear Druid. This is just what I did. I'm not saying that other splits aren't really good too. It's just a lot of this is personal preference. So Barbarian, for example, has good synergy with Bear Druid. With the iconic, I didn't want to use an LR Heart on an iconic PDK life, so I stuck with Fighter, and I feel also that Fighter has a lot of benefits, as I've already outlined in this video. Now, one thing I know is popular, as I alluded to before, is the 1 Warlock level instead of 1 Fighter. Many builds do this because this would give you Warlock Aura that you can use to charge the Arcane Warrior feat, which is great, particularly for endgame, to get that extra melee power, especially in-game raiding when you're fighting raid bosses. But a couple of reasons I didn't do that, I mean, other than just wanting the PDK past life and not wanting to use an LR plus 1 heart, you can't get that feat. So here's a couple things to keep in mind. You can't get the feat to benefit from it until level 28, whereas if you take Fighter, you're going to be able to benefit from that the whole time you're leveling this build. And Haste Boost is incredible, and new players won't have access to Ravenloft to unlock Destinies, and by getting Haste Boost through Kensei, you can spend less action points on a action point type build. So I felt that was another good reason to go Fighter instead of Warlock. So yeah, those are just really good things. I mean, and we already talked about the proficiencies. You get all the martial proficiencies. So it effectively saves you 2 feats. And gives you an access to Haste Boost for less action points spent. So I think it's a really good, compelling reason to go Fighter. Although, certainly, if you want to, you can go Warlock, but that's more of an in-game thing. Another thing to keep in mind here, other comments, you get the ability to cast while rage. in tier 4 of the bear tree. However, this only applies to druid spells. It doesn't apply to cleric spells. As far as I could tell, it doesn't apply to the epic destiny spells. At least I don't believe it does. You all correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it applied to like renewal when I was testing this. So you'd have to go, if you want say access to cleric spells while rage, you'd have to go destruction domain instead of strength domain, which is going to mean lower strength, lower reflex saves, because you lose out on the strength domain stuff. You don't need to do that since you can cast the druid spells for self-healing. So I would recommend just going just cast the cleric buffs you have before you, if you're on the iconic version, just cast the cleric buffs you have before you start questing, like right at the beginning of the quest, and you should be good. You can just start raging and you'll still have all the buffs. So it's really is not a big deal. You have the druid spells for self-healing. For me, when I was leveling this build, the hardest level for me was actually level 15, the first level, because the way I split the levels in this build, you start as an 8 druid at level 15, and you don't get access to your 5th level druid spells until druid 9, so you don't have cure critical or greater vigor until you get to level 16. So you'll have to make do with cure serious wounds and regular vigor for that one level, but it's really not that big of a deal. Just something I thought I'd point out. Another feat alternative I wanted to mention, if you want better self-healing before you get access to the Fury of the Wild heal, you could take Maximize instead of the weapon focus feat that I put in the screenshot here, but it's really up to you. But you know, I felt like the Fury of the Wild heal plus the Druid heals you get are enough, plain enough, until you get to, well, really enough for leveling. But even the Druid stuff, it's good enough. It's not amazing self-healing without any meta magics, but it's good enough if you have a devotion item equipped, devotion lore if you can equipped. The Druid spells are good enough for self-healing, but you obviously want the Fury of the Wild heal when you get it. So guys, that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know what you think about this build. If you've tried playing Bear Druid, what are your thoughts on Bear Druid generally? Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.